Tilda Swinton gets her head bitten off by Aslan.
Oh, okay. No gory details, though.
No, you just kind of see him like going to bite the camera sort of thing.
Well, you don't know if she gets her head bitten off then, do you?
It's implied.
She could just have a horribly mauled face.
He might have just torn her face off, I suppose.
Just torn her face off, yeah. Tilda Swinton's just playing it in a very naturalistic sort of way, because I think Tilda Swinton is quite a minimal... Even though she's got a witchy face,
she does stuff low. She looks the part, but she does everything very low key. And it's like really boring. And the director obviously isn't trying to get anything particularly exciting out of her.
Yeah.
Well, you can't say she's not memorable.
You remember all of her lines because, I feel like
I remember like quite a lot of her lines just because of the weird way she says stuff. Both from that and from also the later productions where she appears as other witches.
What was the line you remembered from something?
You can always get them back!
Who ever heard of a witch who really died? You can always get them back!
Best witch is probably Barbara Kellerman. The best.
I mean, she massively overacts and acts real. It's like she's in
too much.
It's like she's in a pantomime and everyone else is in a TV show.
So, but is she the best though of the?
Oh, she probably is.
Yeah.
Tilda Swinton's obviously the best actress, but she's not doing anything in that film. Liam Neeson's got a good voice, but again, like Tilda Swinton, he's not really doing anything. He's just kind of saying the lines and not adding anything to them at all. Not really emoting.
Lucy in the movies is good. She's pretty good for a child actress.
For a child actor, yeah.
Anna Popplewell's a really, really, really wooden actress. I think Lucy's a bit shit in the BBC ones.
Yeah, probably the movie. The movie Lucy is the only one who actually puts in a decent performance. The music is great. Is just amazing for the BBC ones, basically. And some real memorable tunes and like real atmospheric and stuff.
Yeah.
And in the later versions.
Yeah, the music for the BBC is like better than like most film score that you'll hear in most films, I'd say.
And in the movie, it's quite boring, and it's massively overused.
It's a lot
like playing all the time.
It's a lot weaker. The music in the movie is a lot weaker than the music in the average Hollywood movie. I did look up the guy, and it was mostly he's more of like an orchestrator or something. He's not like the guy who usually does the composition. Yeah, it just sounded amateur to me. It just sounds like a guy who like plays a bit of music, knows a few chords and stuff. It didn't sound like a guy who'd actually studied composition and knew what he was doing and had good ideas and all of that. It's just a very amateur piece of work.
Quite a lot of the entertainment from watching the BBC one comes from how bad the costumes
are.
How
yes.
wonky everything looks.
Yeah, well, particularly
like watching Aslan try and turn around.
Yeah, that was good.
Or walk, and how like the legs are moving at different speeds and stuff.
Oh yeah, the beavers.
It's like a full grown man in just like a giant, completely static, like round suit. It looked like it could easily topple over like a bowling pin.
It looked like they basically just wrapped the actors head to foot in chicken wire and then covered them in cheap polyester fur or something. Yeah, no, you can't bend over in those beaver costumes.
I like the when they have like all the people in the background. It's like, oh, so it's all talking animals. So what animals can we get? So there's like a woman holding a horse to stop it from running away, and like a few dogs. Just a few dogs wandering around the set.
I never even noticed that.
That's all the animals. That's the animals of the forest. When they meet Aslan in the camp, there's like a load of women with like some branches in their hair, so they're like the dryads. There's one woman holding a horse.
One woman holding one horse. Is it obvious then that CGI Aslan works better than puppet Aslan? Because puppet Aslan should be shit, but in practice I don't know that CGI Aslan really works any better than puppet Aslan.
Nah, he works better. I mean,
I would say
it's less memorable. It's maybe less memorable because it is like something somehow more memorable about physical puppets than CGI creatures.
Reepicheep is supposed to be like a big mouse. He's not supposed to be a dwarf with like problems with his hips trying to walk around in a giant, hot, sweaty, uncomfortable mouse costume. That's not, seeing the guys in
Warwick Davis. Reepicheep doesn't look like he could beat anyone in a sword fight.
No, he looks like he's going to need a hip replacement sometime soon. Yeah, seeing Aslan trying to awkwardly turn around. Like, Aslan's supposed to be this, like, he's supposed to be the king of the jungle, isn't he? King of all animals. He's supposed to be fearsome. He's supposed to, like, you know, be able to squash the witch and all that sort of stuff. And he can't even turn around. And it's the same with Reaper Chief. You know, he's supposed to be all like a sprightly little, like seeing the little CGI Simon Pegg hop around on that boat. That's a lot more true to what Reaper Chief should be than a arthritic midget in a mouse costume.
Although I felt like they kind of went a bit too far the other way in like when they're having the big battle in Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. It's like half of the fighters are like, you know, these giant centaurs or like ox people or there's like a rhino, and it's like how are these little kids who've like never held a sword before supposed to be useful in this big battle? Well, you could do it so that the animals from Narnia, they're all kind of smaller. They're all smaller animals. They're all like foxes and things. You don't have to put a rhino in it.
Was there a rhino?
Yeah, there was a rhino fighting on their side in Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. And
yeah,
the Queen had polar bears. So I guess you need something to take on the polar
bears. You kind of
like
the fact that the BBC one is just like a woman and a dog and a horse because well, no, I feel like they should have at least tried to make up the dogs like so they look like foxes or something. And there's wolves. The witch's wolves are all clearly just Alsatians. Oh, Alsatians,
just running around.
What about the wolf guy? He was just a guy. Yeah. He didn't know that a wolves howl.
Yeah,
they don't roar.
Either bark or howl or don't roar. That's not something wolves do.
Yeah, lions.
And his
roar.
costume was terrible as well. It's like they decided to make his head about twice the size of a normal person's head for some reason. Lord of the Rings had been a big success, so they're trying to like, how can we duplicate that? And compared to the BBC one, which had a tiny budget, so you've only got like 10 extras, kind of waving their swords at each other, whereas in the movie you got 200 CGI creatures charging at each other,
and a woman with a dog,
Oh, and also a lot of badly hand-drawn creatures, which didn't look remotely like they were really part of the scene. They use the cartoons in the later series, but they're only used for like magical birds and stuff, so it's kind of, it doesn't seem that out of place. Kind of seems more reasonable.
Yes, no, yeah. You mean the magical birds that reset the table in the Dawn Treader?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense because they're not supposed to be like real physical things, or maybe they are, but they don't feel like they're necessarily supposed to be real physical things.
I feel like they used it in Silverchair, but I can't remember.
They're also used in those bees that fly out of the book.
Oh yeah.
Again, that makes sense because it's a magic thing.
Creatures,
it's not meant to be like a real physical thing. He's tempted to shaft his family because there is some reference to him being king, isn't there? He wants to because he doesn't like being the younger one.
Yeah, he wants to rule over Peter specifically and over the others.
What's-her-face is tempted to be pretty in the Dawn Treader. Edmund and Caspian are sort of corrupted by this gold pond in Dawn Treader. Caspian is tempted by the promise of, going off to the west. He's got his responsibility, or the east. He's got his responsibility to his people. He has to resist that temptation.
The young Caspian's tempted to make an alliance with the witch, so he can take over Narnia.
But he doesn't seriously consider that, does he?
Well, briefly, I think he does in the film, or at least for a little while. Silverchair, they get waylaid by the promise of like warm beds in the giant's place. Like off screen in the books, Susan gets tempted by the promise of parties and I was going to say parties and makeup and whatnot, but. So she doesn't get to go to heaven.
She's like that South Korean woman. Please give me a cock.
You're gonna put that clip in.
Maybe I will.
Cock. It's cock. It's in English.
She likes.
You're gonna put all this swearing in this conversation about children's films.
Yeah, maybe not.
They lived for over a decade as kings and queens.
Yes.
Presumably never having sex with each other, even though there's no other humans.
See, you have a go at me for mentioning an innocent YouTube video where a woman says cock, and then you fucking bring up the concept of decades long incest.
Well, you don't have to put it in.
Yeah, it's going in.
because there's no other humans in Narnia as far as we can tell. I guess there's dryads.
No,
and,
but why do they have to have?
fauns
They
and
don't
stuff.
have to have sex with. They
Well,
can have
'cause
sex
they're-
with animals. What's,
Well, that's
what's
what.
wrong
Yeah,
with
that's what
that?
I'm wondering. Is like which animals are they
What,
having
so
sex
are
with?
you saying it's more? Is it more morally objectionable for the
And were
Pevensey family
there-
to have sex
is there
with
a
each
line,
other than to
is
have
there a
sex with
line that
animals?
descended from them who were like half badger?
Right, I
people?
see. Are there
Living in Narnia
Are there
today?
like no centaurs in the original Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe?
Yeah, it's just
and suddenly in
horses.
Caspian, there's centaurs.
Yeah.
None of these characters have any agency, do they? They almost never get themselves out of their own scrapes. They never decide where they're going to be at any given time. They're always just fucking following instructions, aren't they?
Well, yeah, and half the time when they get in some like really bad trouble, they just go, "Oh, Aslan!"
Yeah.
And then Aslan shows up and fixes it all. I don't think Lucy gets to kill anyone.
Yeah, well, she's just a girl. She's just a nurse, isn't she? Secretary, nurse, primary school teacher. That's what she's got her future set out for. Susan's future is to get ran through by about 50 wartime dudes.
You're talking about children's book, John.
Yeah. Susan, you whore. The boy, I like the boy who plays Caspian in. He's like really bad, but really bad in a likable sort of way.
Yeah, he seems really happy about everything.
Yeah.
And when people are chasing him and trying to kill him, he's like, "This is great,
An
an adventure."
There's a little bit at the end showing that maybe Susan's not such a massive whore because a nice Jewish boy comes up to her and she.
Are you talking about the movie now?
Yeah, she repels him because she's some kind of anti-Semite or something.
He's minging. He's minging looking.
He's minging. He's a nice boy. He's gonna grow up to be a banker or a moneylender or something.
On both versions, they put in the whole of that poem or whatever. That's
I'm the something that eats a moose on a grey
he does.
puddle of
I'm
ice.
the weird werewolf guy.
I am hunger. Where I bite, I hold till I die.
I can fast 100 years and not die.
I can lie 100 nights on the ice and not freeze.
I can drink a river of blood and not burst.
Show me your enemies.
So yeah, the BBC one's like a third the length of the movie, and they choose to fill that most of that extra time with unnecessary extra battle scenes. They attack the castle,
Yeah.
which has nothing to do with the book, but and it turns out to be pointless because it doesn't get them anywhere. I don't know what the point of that is.
Oh shit! Yeah, there's a whole fucking castle thing that's not in the book, is it?
Yeah, and it all goes wrong, and a bunch of like the ox guy has to hold the gate open and then get shot full of arrows.
Will Poulter, he's pretty good as Eustace, better than the.
Yeah, he's like a proper actor, which is why he's still
He's become-
acting in stuff.
Maybe we shouldn't over egg how good of an actor he is, because he's good these days. I don't know if you would necessarily look at him and. I mean, yeah, he does seem like a
At
proper
the
actor.
time, well, he does
seem-
kind of like Lucy. He was better than most child actors.
Yeah, I like the actual the water. They actually have water like pouring out of the.
Yeah, they actually had a proper physical effect where they're underwater, still in the bedroom, but
Yeah.
they're underwater.
Yeah, well, I mean, that room was clearly a set, wasn't it? It was clearly a watertight set that they could fill with water. They just have a blue screen effect where they fly into the picture in the BBC version, which is a bit rubbish. And I really like the sea serpent. I think the sea serpent actually looks quite good in the BBC.
It's quite memorable with all its loads of teeth, and you get to have a good look at it. The movie and the BBC one are completely different. Like they changed the story for the movie like drastically.
Yeah.
There's no mention of slavery in the movie at all.
There's like guys, they're in like a cathedral or something, and guys like drop from the ceiling or
Yeah,
something.
there's just guys living in the ceiling of the cathedral for some reason, and they drop down a load of ropes, have a big sword fight. They win the sword fight, and then that's pretty much the end of that story at that point.
That whole sequence was just a set piece with no actual story surrounding it.
They've been sort of preying on the residents and like sending them out as sacrifices to the green mist for reasons which are not explained.
Green mist. Oh yeah, because that comes up at the end of the
Green
film.
Mist was like picking all these people up. None of this stuff makes sense. None of the changes they made to the film makes any sense.
Marcus and McFeely, fucking hacks.
Well, I kind of understand like changes they made to the previous two, but it
Like, what was it? The Eustace Dragon Island and the Gold Pond Island were the same island.
yeah, but there doesn't seem to be any connection between the Dragon's Gold and the gold spring.
That's just compressing it, isn't it?
There's no reason why they can't be in the same place.
Yeah.
Obviously, the main reason for the changes to the movie is that the book's kind of episodic. None of the islands or even the voyage really has any story connecting it.
Yeah.
It's just they're going east and like seeing what adventures they'll find.
That's where the BBC one really comes into its strength, isn't it? You can just have one or two stories per episode, and it makes perfect sense.
2 islands per episode.
But then just like arbitrarily, they always need these fucking stupid cliffhangers at the end. Oh, it's going to swallow us up. Oh, it's fine.
Oh, it's all right. Oh, Aslan. Oh, we're all right now.
Yeah.
In the series, they lose some of their provisions, and then they
don't have water.
Yeah, they're stranded and running out of water.
And used to steal some water.
Yeah, and it kind of showing like what a wrong and what a bad one he is.
Yeah.
Whereas they don't bother with that in the movie.
And that's a good episode for setting up. You know, he's a cowardly, snivelling, backstabbing, untrustworthy turncoat. He's completely self-centered, and so that nicely sets up the character arc that he goes through as the dragon.
Yeah.
So it's good to have that episode to kind of establish his character in the A section so that you can have him be a different character in the B section. Rather than having him as the dragon for like 5 minutes of screen time, and feels a bit insignificant, doesn't it? Feels a bit trivial to have your character as a dragon for like 10% of the screen time. It's like you kind of want to if that's one of the most interesting things that happens, you want to drag it out for most of the film, don't you? You want him to be a dragon for like a third or a half of the screen time.
I quite like the thing where he's like kind of he's at a real low point where he knows that they're going to have to leave him behind.
Leave him. Yeah, that is
he's
nice,
just going to be a lonely dragon on this island for the rest of his life.
Yeah, that would have been good. And that's when Aslan comes to him when he's at his low point.
Yeah. Yeah, the main thing the movie adds that annoys me is this magic sword business.
There are
seven. You must have seen enough of it to know about the magic swords.
Yeah, I remember you telling me about it while we were watching it. I don't actually remember.
You don't actually remember seeing it.
No,
there are 7.
I don't remember seeing any of the swords.
There were
that you're
7
talking
lords who, for some reason, had 7 magic swords. Each had a magic sword.
I couldn't describe to you what any of these swords look like. Or
I think they just
where
look
they
like
found
generic
them.
swords.
But where did they find the swords? Did they find the swords?
Yeah, they're just in the when they find like a dead lord or whatever, they find a sword nearby.
I have no recollection of that.
And for some reason these swords are magic, and for some reason they have to place all of these magic swords on a magic table. And so for some reason they have these magic swords. For some reason they've all gone east with them, and for some reason they all have to be placed on a magic table to defeat some green mist. And none of this is ever explained. The reason for this is not explained at any point, and I don't think you possibly could have an explanation for it.
Yeah,
in one the sea serpent's just a random creature they bump into.
Right, yes, they changed the nature of the sea serpent, didn't they?
One of them just imagines a sea serpent and then it appears, and so they have to fight it. Nothing anyone else imagines shows up for some reason.
Well, in neither of them is it particularly dark, because it's like Mirkwood, where you literally can't see anything.
Yeah, it's just foggy.
And it was like that in The Hobbit, wasn't it? It wasn't. We weren't looking at like half an hour's worth of the screen being completely blank because you can't see anything in Mirkwood.
Ideally, in movies, you need to be able to see the characters.
See characters, yeah.
But then they defeat the evil with the sword or the table, or possibly by stabbing a sea serpent. I'm not sure which it was. And all of the people who were sacrificed, many days' journey back the other way, all show up in their boats, completely unharmed and alive and not starving or anything, just there. And somehow they fit them all onto their boat and take them back to their homes.
There was a girl character that they introduced, Gail.
And she didn't. There didn't even seem to be any reason for her to be there.
She didn't do anything. She didn't like interact with the other.
She had a couple of lines.
She had one scene with Lucy, maybe.
Nobody learned any lessons because she was there, or she didn't like need to be rescued or anything.
Caspian and the lady have got big boners for each other. Is that right? Or is that in both, clear in both
I think that's
versions
in
or
both
not really?
of them. Or
Or is it more that Caspian has the boner and the lady's like, whatever?
she's got a lady boner?
Does she have a lady boner, or is she just like, whatever?
I can't remember.
The very end of the world. So then they say goodbye to Reaper Jeep.
That's probably because it's like a movie. You've had your big battle. Now it's just time to everyone say goodbye and roll credits. So you don't want none of this, like they're wandering through like a magical area where the lights are super bright. They have the song in. They kind of have like a weird version.
And they had Simon Pegg sort of...
He was just kind of mumbling it too.
Yeah, he's just...
But with no tune at all.
And the guy was like, that's beautiful.
Yeah, just you mumbling to yourself with no tune.
Simon Pegg, mumbling. One of the very, very few good visual sequences in anywhere in the movie, the room, Eustace's bedroom with the water. They're all underwater, and that's a nice shot.
It's like C.S. Lewis doing a whole political thing about how modern schools are stupid and they're teaching kids wrong.
Yeah,
teaching all more bad ideas.
Yeah, I think they're all supposed to refer to each other. There's no like religion, and there's no like discipline, and the kids are just allowed to do whatever they want all the time, and they all refer to each other by their surnames for some reason. I'm not sure what that's about. I don't know if these were actual conventions that were occurring in the the 1950s or whatever England, or if he's just making it up. It's not something I've ever seen before. So he gives us some signs to remember, and she is bafflingly incompetent at remembering these signs. 4 single sentence instructions. She finds it impossibly difficult to remember them.
And he gives away the game. He says whoever says in the name of Aslan, that's the prince.
You will know the lost prince if you find him by this, that he will be the first person. Okay, so they do establish that then.
They don't figure out themselves that the only young man they've met in their entire journey is actually the prince.
Well, I mean, it's not the only young man. He's like practically the only human. There's only 2 humans that they see north of the Marshwiggle out camp. They literally don't see any other humans at any point. You can't remember the signs.
She can't remember them. But to be fair, Eustace and Puddleglum also never bother to remember them either, or she never bothers to tell them what they are.
Yeah.
And no one ever thinks to write any of them down.
What to do, wouldn't do. I quite like that.
There's
wouldn't do. The you too. I think so too. All the sentences ending with ooh sounds.
That gimmick.
No,
there's a bunch of contrivances there. As to why they can't like take an army with them when they go. They just have to get one. They talk to the owl. The owl says, "Oh no, the dwarf guy. They've passed a law saying no one's allowed to go looking for him anymore because so many people have disappeared trying to find the prince. Also, we can't go with you because we don't like travelling at daytime. The only possible person who can go with you is this one Marshwiggle dude.
What's wrong with that?
Well, it's just...
right, there's only one person.
You could have had it so, take an army with you. And but there'll be some horses who can carry proper tents and stuff. And...
No, but narratively, that needs to be the case because they've fucked up the first sign, haven't they? That's the consequence for fucking up the first sign.
Right, yeah.
The whole point is, if he greets the friend, you will have good help. That's the first sign. And because they didn't have because they fucked the first sign, so that's the consequence for screwing up the first sign.
And they meet Puddleglum, which is the best character and like a most amusing performance in the whole of the BBC stuff.
Well, and the movies. It's the best, most memorable performance and best character in all of it. He's very pessimistic, but at the same time, he's got a very kind of like can-do, kind of put on a bold face, plucky kind of attitude.
Let's give it a try. We'll probably die, but let's have a go anyway. He's the one who kind of is kind of immune to the witch's hypnotisms.
So he's not immune exactly. He does seem to be more resistant to it somehow.
He's like a proper Narnian. He's the most faithful one.
Yeah, that's true. He's the one who's like trying to follow the signs and stuff. He doesn't. They keep saying, "Oh, you're wrong." Like at the start, he's saying like, "Oh, I'll give you a terrible tummy ache," oh, it tastes terrible to you, and they're like, oh, it's delicious. Oh, but it'll give you a terrible tummy ache in the morning. And they're like, I feel fine. It's fine. You know, he keeps saying like bad stuff's going to happen, and it doesn't happen. But then when they meet the witch, he's like, oh, I don't know what she's doing here. And they were like, oh, we don't know why you were so mean to the two of them. He's like, two of them, I only saw one. I saw a suit of armor. Who knows what's inside? You know, he's got all this kind of negative way of looking at things. And then they're like, oh, Puddleglum, you've been wrong about everything. But he is actually right about... So it's interesting having this character who's like always hitting the pessimistic note, but then he's the only one who... He was correct in sort of not trusting, because he was like, let's not tell her anything about what we're doing or where we're going. And instantly they're like, oh, we're looking for the buried city of the giants or whatever. Yeah. And there's a shot of him going, oh. Yeah, no, it's just interesting having a character who... his whole thing is he's pessimistic at every turn, but like... And he does seem to be wrong most of the time, but occasionally, like a stop clock, he's right. I don't know what you're supposed to do with a character like that.
It's because he's like the faithful one. He's like the good Aslanite.
Yeah.
He's like, we stick to the signs and we don't do anything else, whereas the others are all like, no, I'm cold. I don't want to be here.
But then he's a marsh wiggle, so he's kind of made for that environment. He's made for marshy... Like, they don't like being wet, but he's kind of designed to be wet all the time. Whereas Jill only gets wet when she thinks of those warm beds.
When you think about the journey they make, you kind of think Aslan could have just said, when you get to Narnia, find a shovel and dig directly downwards, and you will find a bunch of people digging upwards, and they are the bad guys. They could have just found that hole and gone down that way.
I don't think it's funny at all, said Jill. I think you'll be a wicked tyrant. What, said the knight, still laughing and patting her head in a quite infuriating fashion. Is our little maid a deep politician? But never fear, sweetheart. Where I come from, said Jill, who was disliking him more every minute, they don't think much of men who are bossed about by their wives. Shalt think otherwise when thou hast a man of thine own, I warrant you, said the knight, apparently thinking this very funny. So it's like all the way through the scene in the book, it's like showing him as this like really irritating, smug, pompous, like, you know, really conceited, full of himself sort of dude. And that's completely different from the way that they chose to represent. He's kind of a Charles Manson type figure it's kind of this intense, unhinged psychopath in the TV series. A very different presentation.
Yeah. I wonder if they did that so that he would seem more dangerous, so they would be less willing to let him out. It's like, oh no, we can't let this guy out. He's crazy.
Well, it's one of the bit that kind of shines in the book to me. This idea of this guy who's really full of himself and talking to them in this really patronising way, which they find really irritating. That's one of the more entertaining parts of the book. Like, regardless of whether or not it kind of works from like a narrative sense, I just like it. He says by Aslan, and they're like, oh, it's the fourth sign. And there's a moment of like uncertainty of whether or not they should follow the sign or not, but they decide they probably should. Oh, there's also that bit under the ground where they're like really scared, but then Puddleglum's like, no, we're under the city, we're following the sign, everything's back on track. That's like the kind of religious bit. This idea of being sort of stoical, sort of this idea that there's a set of like principles that you're supposed to follow. And the kind of, you're not supposed to pay attention to like the outcomes and how things are going. You're supposed to be paying attention to the degree to which you're following your principles. Like, that's how like a nun or a monk would live their life. They wouldn't think about, oh, I've got fucking brain cancer, everything's going to shit. They'd think about, no, I'm following the program that I'm supposed to following, so everything's as it should be, because all I'm supposed to do is follow the program and I'm not supposed to worry about the external stuff. That's Puddleglum showing his kind of piety, his saying, oh, we're following the signs, it's good. That's a very kind of Christian religious believery sort of mentality that he's showing there. He also says, doesn't he? He says it's like the thing with the the Green Knight, Gawain and the Green Knight, where the whole thing is you've got to submit to having your head chopped off. It's not your place to think, I'm not going to let someone chop my head off. The honor demands that you have to let your head be chopped off.
Oh yeah,
and he says Aslan never said what would happen to us after we set him free.
Is it safe to set him free? And he's like, well, he never said it would be safe.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's the proper kind of religious, mythological kind of fairy tale logic part of the story coming out. That's kind of what makes these books really special, really, that side of things.
In a more atheistic kind of culture, will they tone all that stuff down a bit? in future versions.
Maybe. I mean, Greta Gerwig's a clever lady. She can... Right, you're not so sure. You think she's like Marilyn Monroe. She's kind of clever on some level and stupid on some level.
Well, we've seen 2 films by her.
Both seemed like films written by a intelligent but not especially talented person, was the impression that I got. Part of the reason why I really like this one is I feel like there's a kind of a superficiality to the kind of religious, there's a shallowness to the religious elements of the other ones, like... so like in Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, you've got Aslan's Garden of Gethsemane moment, and it's like, it's like, oh, I've got to do it, and it's like, okay, that's like Jesus, and then he dies and he comes back, and it's like, yeah, that's like Jesus, and it's like, oh, Aslan's telling us to go this way, and it's like, oh yeah, you got to follow the... And it's all a bit superficial, or like all the, you know, the wateriest water that was ever watered. All the religious stuff in the early ones strikes me as a bit superficial. But I feel there's a lot more depth to the signs, the idea of the signs in this one, and having to follow the signs, and like I say, the kind of stoical quality of like, oh, if you're following the signs, it doesn't matter how everything else seems to be going with your journey. As long as you're following the signs, you're in the right place. And then again, this again is a more kind of theologically, philosophically interesting thing. This thing of Puddleglum's thing of, you know, this world. If this world is made up, this world that we're dreaming of, then it's a lot better than anything you've got to offer us down here. She's like, sun? What is a sun? And he's like, oh, it's like your lamp, but really, really bright. And she's like, you say that the sun is like a lamp that's bright. It seems to me that you're just seeing the lamp and thinking of something. Everything that you tell me about your world is just something that you've taken from this world and magnified so that it seems bigger. Oh, what, is there a country in the roof?
Yeah, hamming it up as usual. And then she transforms into a snake in like a weird transition.
It's
where
like a fraction of a second.
For a fraction of a second, you see her made up like as a snake with like contact lenses and like fake claws. It like looks quite scary for a split second,
Yeah.
and then she just turns into a real unconvincing rubber snake that just kind of waves back and forth.
Yeah, it says in the book, it says she's the type of person where she couldn't tolerate any situation where she dies or she loses or whatever. She's got to take everything with her. The idea is she's specifically constructed stuff so that if she dies, everything else everyone else is murder, homicide.
It activates the self-destruct when she dies. There's a dead man switch.
Yeah, she wants. Exactly. Yeah, she's set up as self-destruct because she's. It's the idea is that she's got kind of like a bitter temperament, and that's she's intentionally wants to bring about the death of lots of people if she dies as well.
I would say there's not that much good about either of them. The BBC ones at least have good music. They're quite faithful to the original story.
Yes.
So they kind of don't get as much wrong, apart from having real wonky puppets and stuff. The puppets are kind of charming. Like, they don't make you hate the series. They're just kind of funny. The movies, it's just the music's forgettable. The CGI is just middling. It doesn't look particularly... It's not bad, but it doesn't look that convincing. Physical effects always look like nicer and more charming and kind of more memorable than CGI.
Oh yeah, they should definitely try and do, you know, if they can have a good puppet Aslan and a good animatronic sea serpent and stuff, I definitely think they should do that instead of doing CGI. I think Reaper Cheap has to be CGI. But
yeah, he's too small to.
He's supposed to be nimble. He's supposed to be like hopping about the deck of the ship and stuff. Like, if you film a stage play directed by like an intelligent person who just knows how to manage actors in a normal way, versus a high budget Hollywood film managed by an idiot who doesn't know how to direct things, doesn't know how to deal with characters, and doesn't know how to tell stories and all that sort of stuff, you know, it will still be better. Like, I do think that the people who made the BBC Narnia series were like competent, you know, people who'd worked in like theatre and TV and stuff like that, and did have the basics down.
They probably had more experience directing actors.
The
movies, it was the guy who directed Shrek, wasn't it?
Yeah, my impression is that the Shrek guy, Andrew Adamson, I think he's called. My impression is that he had probably spent most of his career doing like visual effects on like Disney films and stuff, whereas the people who were in charge of the BBC thing had probably spent their career directing like episodes of The Bill and Inspector Morse and Biker Grove and stuff like that. That would be my
Well, it's
presumption.
like Doctor Who is the thing. It really seems.
Well, yeah,
it really
yeah,
seemed like
Doctor Who,
episodes
yeah.
of Doctor Who in like the budget and stuff.
Yeah, so it just feels to me like the BBC ones, they come from that BBC drama world where everything's kind of at a certain standard, whereas the Hollywood ones, they're kind of helmed by this guy who really seems like more of a technical guy, like a guy who doesn't really know how to, like you say, doesn't really know how to direct actors and doesn't really have a very strong grasp of storytelling and stuff. So
I don't mind the movies. I don't hate the movies as much as you do.
Yeah.
I think they're just about competent. There's nothing special about them.
just
but
about,
they're
we'll put that on the poster, shall we?
barely competent.
Jeffrey Burns says just about competent.
Yeah, barely competent. But they don't do anything like really terrible. They're just
Yeah, well, the
there's
writing-
nothing really good about them.
Yeah, I mean, there's too much music. He's definitely a worse director than Peter Jackson, and Peter Jackson is a massively overrated director. He's not as good as at the tone.
Wait, are you saying Peter Jackson's overrated? What am I?
Peter Jackson's overrated, but I'm saying this guy is not as good as Peter Jackson, who is already an overrated
I'd say
director.
that. Peter Jackson at least has some like interesting quirks to the way he does stuff. He can get like amusing performances out of his actors and stuff.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I just lack the vocabulary, the cinematic, education to really know what's going on here. But it just feels very strongly like he's a guy who doesn't really know how to direct films. You would just tell people to watch the BBC ones over. If they had to watch one or the other, you would say, if they were going to watch one of each of those first three, you would just say, just go BBC all the way. You wouldn't. If they were only going to watch one of each, you wouldn't recommend anything other than BBC, would you?
Yeah. Well, the Prince Caspian ones, there's not much to it though.
Yeah, but then
wouldn't
the
say-
stuff that they add in the film version doesn't improve it though, and it just kind of confuses
I
it.
thought it was like the battles were done quite well in the Prince Caspian one. I thought.
Yeah.
They didn't really need to be there a lot of the time. But I thought they were quite well planned out and stuff.
So you
they
think-
looked pretty good?
The BBC did the best Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe and the best Dawn Treader, but you think there's an argument to be made that the movie version of Caspian is better.
The BBC one isn't bad. It's just it's kind of
Too short.
It's kind of too rushed.
That's your main gripe with
It's
the
maybe
BBC.
you could maybe say it's still better, but it's kind of too rushed. I think it is mainly the music. The main thing the BBC ones have got going for them is the music. Netflix, in theory, is going to be releasing a new one directed by Greta Gerwig in the next couple of years.
Who is Timothy Chalamet going to play? Because he's definitely going to be in it.
He'll be Aslan. He'll be Tumnus.
I think maybe they'll save him for Caspian then. I mean, he might not still be a big star by
I
then.
wouldn't assume he's going to be in it.
He is going to be in it because he's the big actor right now, and because all the women are on birth control. Probably less of a religious overtone to it.
Didn't you look her up and you saw she was religious? She was like Christian. or something?
No, like raised Christian. I don't think she's going to be. She's one of these fucking coastal elites. Fucking contempt for the working class. She's one of these fucking Democrats. Weird, yeah, weird. Yeah, she's one of these weird people.